Fair use, fair use. For educational purposes only. For educational purposes only.
In the crossway, Edom stood in the crossway and tried to halt the migration, firstly, of the Jews, the true Jews that were trying to leave Jerusalem at the time of the Babylonian exile. And then later in the second cycle, they tried to halt the migration of the Jews as they were fleeing as the Romans came down and destroyed the temple in 70 of the Common Era. Remember, there were two sects of Jews, authentic, real Jews that were in the land. There was the royal Negro class, which was the high class traveling merchant class that tried to escape and eventually went down to West Africa and established the kingdom of Judah. And then there was the poorer class, which were the Fehalim, the Middle Eastern Fehalim. Fehalim is a term that was coined by the historians David Ben-Gurion, who was the first prime minister of Israel, and the historian Ben-Zvi, who was the first president of Israel. They established, when they came into the land at the beginning of the 20th century, that the Arabs that were in the land, they were actually the real Jews that had remained in the land since 70, and they had become converted to Islam at the time of the Mohammedans because they couldn't afford to pay the jizya tax. They would have either lost the land, which they were totally dedicated to, this poor migrant class, or they had the choice of keeping the land and converting. Many did, but secretly believe in the Orthodox scriptures of the New Testament on pain of death. This is the reality. So everything that's up is down, what's black is white, and we've been served up a bunch of lies. But this is being exposed, but many people don't want to listen because it is politically incorrect when you've got such great financial funding of Zionism or to those of us that love the word. So again, we have to look at the whole context of this as Edom stood in the crossways, trying to prevent the migration of the true Jews, whether that was the royal Negro house of Judah or whether that was the migrant class of Fehalim. They still tried to prevent their...
Notice the guy told you that the true Judeans, which he referred to as Jews, were Negroes. We are the royal house of David. Now, let's look at this term anti-Semitic. So even if we wanted to use their false narrative, because anti means against, and Shemitic means any descendant of Shem, which is one of the three sons of Noah. It is not limited or specific for anyone calling themselves Jewish. Okay? So, let's look at the term and definition. It says hostility or prejudice against Jewish people. Anti-Semitic remarks were posted on the site. They use that as a reference. Okay, we are at the Library of Congress. This is their new and accurate map of Negro land. Now, the royal, regal class, which are Negroes, we descend from King David. I'm also going to take you next to the Jewish encyclopedia to prove those things. So, when we scroll down, you see Negro land is here, right? Now, when I zoom in, this area right here says Kingdom of Judah, or from the French, Ouida, Slave Coast. This is where they took us. They knew that we were the tribe of Judah, that we were the Sephardic Judeans who got kicked out of Spain and Portugal. Even the name Negro originated from Spain and Portugal. Okay, this book is called The Brief American Pageant. Okay? Now, this is written in Old English. It says, Negroes just arrived in the ship William, right? So they knew who we were. Yaḥya, the Jewish encyclopedia.com. Okay, we're here at the Jewish Encyclopedia. Number 7, Judah. Yahya, Negro. Ben in Hebrew means son. David. Again, we are from the royal Davidic line. So you can't use anti-Semitic against Negroes because we are Judeans from the tribe of Judah. Fair use for educational purposes only.
And Eli Faber and other Jewish scholars would agree. So first, look at Faber's description of the horrors of the slave trade, just to jar us so we feel it again. He said, despite assiduous efforts by historians since Philip D. Curtin published his seminal study, The Size of the Slave Trade in 1969, we shall probably never know, in all its grim and cruel enormity, how many men, women, and children on the continent of Africa were trapped in the net of the Atlantic slave trade, wrenched from their homes and their families, marched in chains to the coasts, and transported across the seas during an era that lasted well over 3 centuries. Millions were condemned to spend the remainder of their lives in servitude and to witness the enslavement of their children. Many more did not survive the Atlantic crossing, perishing instead on vessels swept by disease or from a profound depression that the historical record tells us frequently sees many of the captives in its grip. Still others died within a few years of arrival, toiling on the plantations and in the mines of Europe's colonies in the Western Hemisphere. So Faber paints a picture, drastic picture of the horrors of the slave trade. And all that is, they're just words. Who can imagine how horrible it was, how terrible it was, how evil it was? What kind of role did Jews play? And what's the secret that is being covered up? That's what we really need to know. So I'm going to continue to quote from Faber, again, just a top scholar in the subject and a highly reliable book. This is what he says. That Jews participated in the slave trade, sometimes by investing in companies engaged in it, sometimes as the owners of slave ships, and that they owned slaves when they settled in the Americas, are matters that have been known from a substantial body of works produced by Jewish historians. In other words, there's no secret. This is nothing that's been covered up. This is nothing that's been hidden. This is nothing that the Jewish community hasn't talked about openly and documented even for a couple of centuries. And you can go to a standard Jewish reference book like Encyclopedia Judaica, dozens of volumes, look up the lengthy article on slavery and the slave trade. It'll lay things out. There's no secret to that. But here's the long and short.
Okay. See, there's no secret that they are the real anti-Semites. We are Negroes from the royal house of David.